Hello and welcome to Rainbow Table. It is so nice to see you all again. Rainbow Table is EGAL's Rainbow Table, and we bring you LGBTQI2S for seniors information. We highlight organizations, we highlight people, we have different topics. We've talked about sex on this show. If you are watching through YouTube and you have a chance, go to Facebook and join our Rainbow Table Facebook page. We're growing literally by the day. And we have actually done a number of episodes before today. So if you're just new to the Rainbow Table family, welcome. And if you want to go back and review them or watch them for the first time, you can go to EGAL's website, egale.ca/Rainbow Table, and take a look at the work that we've done. Okay, so today's topic, very timely, is of course going to be about COVID-19. We called it COVID-19 Facts and Fears. So I don't know about yourself, but it's been about a year now, and quite literally everything has changed, right? How we shop, how we interact, how we communicate, how we stay connected to community, mostly here on the internet. It has literally affected every corner of the world, and particularly something we've learned to find out is that this pandemic affects seniors disproportionately. So I think it's going to be a really nice chat today. We're going to talk about some facts and fears. We really want to hear from you. You'll see in the comment section, we've put some quick links in there so that if you don't want to write down Rainbow Table Facebook page, rainbowtable.egale.ca, you can simply go over there, copy and paste, or click on the links, and you can join our Facebook page later on, or take a look at those videos a little bit later on. But I want you to stay put for now, okay? So we have two very special guests today. One is joining us from Victoria, BC, the West Coast, Dr. Gloria Gutman. And then right here in Toronto, if I'm in Toronto, am I? Where's Waldo? Dr. Samir Sinha is going to be joining us. We're going to speak with them separately, and then we're going to speak with them together, and I have a very important question for the two of them at the end. Are you ready to get started? It's so nice to have you back. Okay, without further ado, more accomplished than 500 pieces of paper would allude to, but I will read a little bit about Dr. Gloria Gutman. Established the Gerontology Research Center and Development of Gerontology at Simon Fraser University, and is well known internationally as a researcher, author, and advocate for senior citizens. She's here today to talk about a recent study that she just published of 4,380 Canadians aged 55 and up, that's you, maybe, if you're a Rainbow Table member, that explored how COVID-19 is affecting their mental health and physical health, lifestyle and plans for future health care. And the study was especially interested in COVID's impact on people who'd lived through other pandemics, such as the Spanish flu, polio, and of course, the HIV/AIDS crisis. Gender and age differences are also a major focus. So without further ado, let's have less of me and a little more of Dr. Gutman. Let's bring her onto the stage here.
Hello.
Do you feel like someone's been talking about you?
Indeed, but I'm from Vancouver, not from Victoria.
Oh, excuse me. I thought, where is Simon Fraser?
Vancouver.
Oh my gosh. I am so sorry. Listen.
That's fine. That's your fact for the day.
It is my fact for the day. There's a reason why there's a nickname for people from Ontario, and I know the word. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's really nice to see you. I've gotten to know you, of course, through speaking with you a few times before today's live episode. So I want to thank you in advance for taking the time to talk about this today. So much has happened over the last year, obviously. And as I mentioned in the intro, not a single corner of the universe has been not touched, right? So, but disproportionately seniors, which is the work that you do, and of course Rainbow Table is for LGBTQI2S seniors, there are some findings that you found in your research that affect older folks as opposed to younger folks. Can we talk about that?
Well, it was really interesting because, we've heard a lot about the situation of older people who are in care facilities, but that's only 5% of the seniors population. Our survey was directed to seniors people, in fact, 55 and over, who were living in the community, so in conventional housing in the community. And within that group, we were interested in knowing, are there differences between what some people call the young old, so 55 to 64, the 65 to 74, and then the 75 and over group. And we found surprises because I guess I started out thinking, well, gee, it's going to be the older old who are most impacted. But that's not what we found. In fact, the people who have had the hardest time in coping with COVID have been the younger group, so the 55 to 64. And we began, to think about, well, why might this be the case? And part of it is because, at least within our sample, 40% were still in the workforce. And then I thought about myself, I'm still working. I'm a golden oldie, but I'm still working. And my routine has been very much disrupted.
Right.
And so I think, and plus the younger old people may well be what we used to call the sandwich generation. So they've still got young people, their own kids, some of whom are coming home because they can't afford to maintain places because they're not working, but they've also got their parents. So you can see that why they might be more stressed than the older groups.
Right.
So that was one of the findings. The second big finding was we were curious to know who's hit harder, men or women. And what we found was that people who identify as women were more impacted. And it even goes down to things like exercise. I thought, well,
I want to know why that is. That's, okay. So exercise or lack thereof.
Well, exercise is a good example because I just sort of assumed that the people that go to gyms are, more men than women. Well, I've tried to get some hard data on that, and nobody seems to have the answer. But in some of the responses to our open-ended questions, what the women were saying was they missed going to the gym, not so much because of the exercise itself, but because it's a social activity. And so it seems that women, amongst other things, have had their social connections even more cut off. And plus, we used to talk about, I married him for better or for worse, but not for lunch. And so,
what does that mean? What does?
So they've got, the hubby is home all day long. So for those who don't work, that interferes with their lifestyle. And so, they've got to worry about him, not just themselves or their own routines. And then the third big finding, which is very relevant to today's talk, is that like the egale survey, which was done in April and which had people from age 18 on, what our survey showed was that the public health messaging really is being resonated within the LGBT community. And even more than their heterosexual age mates, people in the LGBT community are taking it seriously and they are protecting themselves.
And that's something that we had a Twitter follower, Jonathan's backstage right now, I'm not sure of his name, but we did have a Twitter follower talk about our response as an LGBTQI2S community and how we here before-ish. Can we talk a little bit about how our community is responding because of our experience with the HIV/AIDS crisis?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that we have explored specifically in our survey. And we asked some questions about that. And yeah, that came out loud and clear, that people sort of said, been there before, we take this seriously. I was reading an article that was saying that amongst 200 gay men who were Americans who were interviewed. Almost half of them had lost 15 or more friends to the AIDS epidemic. For this older generation, many of them saw friends succumb. And so they say, they're saying, I've got to protect myself. But what they're also showing is pro-social behavior and saying, like, what can we do to help? And looking out for friends and relatives.
Right. Sometimes not waiting for governmental or other community response, but actually looking after our own, which feels very familiar as a community.
Yeah. Because, all of us who are golden oldies are missing the chance to be with our family face to face or to be with our friends face to face. So we're making do as best we can, but some of us are trying a little harder.
And that's the thing, I think about people because I have a lot of friends of different age demographics. And I think, my God, you've lived this amount of time only to be halted in your tracks, to be stuck at home, to not have physical, I don't mean in that way necessarily, but just hugging, touching someone when you talk to them. Like, we're very, humans are pretty tactile. So it does really, I think about it a lot for people that are potentially, seniors, single, living alone, may or may not have a pet, may or may not have other people in their, living environment that they could have put in their bubble early enough. Like, it is a really sad state of affairs, and it has affected people mentally significantly.
Well, it has, but there's also been some silver linings to this, where people have learned to use the internet. I've learned more than I ever wanted to know about Zooming. And, very early on, I have 3 sisters, and we used to contact each other, by phone or sporadic. We now have a standing date for every Friday, and we've become closer than we probably would have if there hadn't been the pandemic. And, I've got a granddaughter that we play internet games. She's taught me how to do things on the internet. I mean, she's only 7, but she's taught me how to do some things I didn't know. At the same time, Granny's had the opportunity to play with her more than I would otherwise. And I mean, she's in Toronto. I'm dying to get on a plane and go visit her. But in the meantime, at least once a week, and probably more often, she will phone me and say, Grandma, how about let's visit on Zoom?
And it's a lot cheaper. I mean, it's not safe to fly right now, but you can really have those micro moments. And, they're only, I don't know how old your granddaughter is, but they're only going to be that age for a certain amount of time, right? So
exactly.
It is interesting how people, and philanthropically, people are responding by prioritizing things that seem, more important now than they might have before. It has really, taken us to a moment where we sort of reflect on what's actually important. What's really important without that, that busyness. And we have to wrap up in about 1 minute, so I don't want to step on your toes for something else that you may want to share.
Come through very clear when we asked people about what else do you want to tell us, and they were saying that they're taking the time to smell the roses, and they're communing with nature more. And when they do visit with somebody, that you may be apart, but still you're really appreciating the opportunity to be there.
Yeah, and I think it's a reset button on a number of different levels. But I think if we were to amplify the positivity out of this very, very sad and tragic pandemic, I think there's something really, really good about humans having to just take a moment, reset, prioritize, and lead with love. Well, thank you very much. Please stick around. I want you to stick around in the green room. There's some virtual snacks. Don't fill up. And we're going to bring on our second guest, and then we'll bring you right back if that's okay. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll be speaking with Dr. Gutman again in Vancouver. So thanks for representing 604. If there's anyone else in the West Coast joining, thank you very much. Our next guest is Dr. Sinha. Again, so hugely and immensely accomplished. I'm going to have to be a fast talker to get this in. Again, it's a cursory view of what Dr. Sinha does. So Dr. Sinha currently serves as the Director of Geriatrics at the Sinai Health System and the University Health Network in Toronto, and is the Director of Health Policy Research at the National Institute of Aging at Ryerson University. Samir's breadth of international training and expertise in health policy and the delivery of services related to care of the elderly have made him a highly regarded expert in the care of older adults. And even in 2014, according to Canada's Maclean's magazine, they proclaimed him to be one of Canada's 50th most influential people and most compelling voice for the elderly. Who better to bring on to talk about COVID-19, facts and fears today than Dr. Sinha? Without further ado, let's welcome him to the stage.
Hi, Deb. Nice to be here today.
Nice to see you. Let me see that. Let me get a closer look at that tie there. Thank you very much. A rainbow table tie right there.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. You are one of the busiest humans on television right now, so I'm sure you've got a few camera crews on the other side of this camera. I'm so grateful for you joining Rainbow Table today. Thank you very much for taking the time. It's so important. So as you heard, Dr. Gutman and I, we talked about the research that they have just completed. With COVID-19 facts and fears, because you speak about this daily, I kind of want to leave it to you without asking you a question, but more, what are some of the things that you're hearing every day that you want to share? And then I want to talk about the vaccine and the variants before we bring Dr. Gutman back on.
Yeah, I think, this has been a really, really long, draining pandemic for all of us. I think, especially for the LGBTQ, community broadly, who've lived through, the HIV pandemic, which is still ongoing, and have experienced so much in terms of fearing for one's own health and well-being individually. To have this add insult to injury to people, where people are literally being isolated from each other, from whomever their family is, and just trying to survive and keep safe. I think it really services a lot of things for a lot of people, which has made this particular year just so difficult. And I think, as my colleague, Dr. Gutman, said, surprising what you actually find when you actually talk to people and find out how they're doing. Because certainly some of the work that we've done when we've looked at the perspectives of older Canadians in general versus people of all ages, I found that older people tend to be weathering this pandemic a little bit better than younger people. Because while they might not have deep, they might not have big social networks, for example, what they do have tended to be, what they do tend to have are smaller but more deep connections with other people. And of course, as we were just hearing, when those connections are even interrupted, that triggers concerns about loneliness and isolation. But I think in general, just there's been so much information floating around about COVID-19, people just don't know. Is it safe, for example, to go to the grocery store? Is it safe to go and even just to go to the hospital to see a doctor, or to go to the emergency department? And so just understanding and being sympathetic to how people are coping or not coping, I think is really important, because I think what will really get us through this pandemic is making sure we get this vaccine rolled out as soon as possible to as many people, but also making sure that we take time for each other, to look out for each other, ask how each other is doing, and know that we may have some members of our community who are much more marginalized than others, who would benefit from that extra helping hand, and sometimes just a telephone call to check in, and to know you're being seen, and know you're welcome to be heard as well.
And that is one of the interesting things too, when I think about how we are really getting right down to what the root of life should really be about as we relate to each other, and leading with love, and being helpful and being safe while you're doing it. Checking in on people. It's tough for some people, myself included, to accept help. So I think this has also been a challenge for people to, like, I don't want you to have to do my groceries, but it is the safer choice because I am in a demographic where I'm positive or I'm older, and I just shouldn't have that, that type of exposure. So as far as community, like Rainbow Table was created in a response to COVID-19 because we knew that our communities would be socially isolated. So we're kind of coming into people's living rooms or kitchens, weekly or every couple of weeks now, so that we can kind of have that response and bring people in. So Dr. Sinha, talk to me about the vaccine and the rollout, and if some of our viewers are a certain age, why it's more important, or health levels more important to get those vaccines.
Yeah, so what we know from the pandemic overall is that that really the biggest challenge has been is that this is a vaccine this is a virus that particularly attacks older people compared to younger people. So generally, the broad brushstrokes of whenever we have a novel virus or infection out there, it tends to go after people with weaker immune systems, and that tends to be three categories of people. Young people, because their immune systems are just developing and they haven't had a chance to be exposed and develop forms of immunity to certain things. So they tend to be incredibly vulnerable. In fact, if you go back to the Spanish influenza, it was young people who were disproportionately affected in our society during that pandemic itself. You then get older people whose immune systems naturally weaken as we get older. And that's called a process called immunosenescence. You can't avoid it. As you get older, beyond the age of 55, your immune system starts to naturally weaken, and it makes it harder for an older person to mount an immune response to a novel pathogen. And then you have folks who might be adults who should have a normal immune system, but may not have that because they might be immunocompromised. And so those who are living, with HIV, for example, those who may be on medications that might weaken their immune system, and there are various autoimmune conditions out there. All these are reasons why there are people who are particularly vulnerable. So older people in particular are the most vulnerable amongst us. And interestingly, from this pandemic, we've seen that young people just don't tend to be a real target of the COVID-19. So when it comes to vaccinations, we really want to get these vaccinations into the arms of those who would benefit from them the most. And by getting them vaccinated the quickest, we're actually going to do the most good in preventing people from getting sick and people preventing from dying. So if we look at who have been the most at risk, it largely is our older population, because anybody over 60 years of age, we know that this is where 96% of our deaths have occurred to date. And we know especially those living in congregate settings, or those who require receiving care from other people, such as a family caregiver, for example, who might be providing a loved one with a bath or coming to do various tasks with them or for them, and also thinking about those living in congregate care settings like long-term care or retirement homes. So this is why now that we have a vaccine available, we've really been trying to focus on getting these into the arms of those people who live in congregate care settings. And now we're starting to focus on vaccinating older people first, and then obviously targeting people who may be receiving home care services or people who may be immunocompromised. So there's a bit of a sequence that our National Advisory Committee on Immunizations have come up with based on the science. But with all that in mind, the question is, well, what should I do if I get offered a vaccine? So my short and simple response is get it. If you can take it,
right.
You should totally take it. Get it as soon as you can get it. And if that opportunity comes up, do not hesitate. But of course, let's be honest here. A lot of people have legitimate questions. They're saying, well, I've heard a few things about this vaccine. How the heck, 2020, and you actually had a full-fledged vaccine developed within less than 12 months? That's unheard of, and it really is unheard of. Because really, people say, like, were their corners cut? Did people? Am I going to be experimented on if I take the vaccine? Like, how safe?
If I had a nickel,
These are
Dr.
all
Sinha,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and so Deb, these are like legitimate questions that I actually think people, if you're thinking of this, ask these questions and find the answers. So I'm going to give some answers to those questions very quickly. Number one is, not a single step was actually skipped in the production of these vaccines. So Health Canada, that actually rigorously reviews these, what usually happens is when you do a vaccine trial, you need to find a lot of money and you need to find a lot of people. And the key is, like governments like the UK, they actually signed up 500,000 citizens who are willing to be part of their vaccine trials right off the bat. So that's why groups like Pfizer, Moderna went and did their trials in England, because they had 400,000 people who raised their hands and said, I want to be involved. Because governments poured billions of dollars into the development of these vaccines, they also told the vaccine companies, you actually have to have people, in these vaccine trials who are older people, for example, people, who have conditions, for example, that we want to better understand. And so when we start actually looking at these vaccine trials and the results, number one is no steps were skipped. They actually had to follow the same steps that any vaccine requirement would have. But because there was immense coordination and good sequencing, we were able to actually get through those steps at a much quicker pace than we've ever seen before, with a huge amount of money, cooperation, and a lot of people volunteering to be a part of these vaccine trials. Number two, when we look at the safety and efficacy data for the two vaccines that have currently been approved in Canada, these are these mRNA vaccines. They're using a technology that can actually be used, and it's been used in cancer research and other vaccine development for years. This technology allows us to actually develop vaccines really, really quickly and get them, and that's why you hear about millions of extra doses being made now and getting out the door, because it's a great vaccine. It's actually been found to be 95% effective, and the side effect profile, when we look at side effects are a normal thing of anything. Any medication you take, any vaccine you take, there's always going to be side effects. But the good news is that pretty much any side of 15 days, and usually only within a day or two at most. And that's usually a bit of a sore arm. That might be some fatigue. That might be a bit of a fever. Those are the usual typical things that people experience. And here's one really piece of great news. Older people who are watching, people older than 55, they actually have less side effects than younger people like me, where when I got my vaccine as a frontline worker, I had some fatigue on my during the first dose. I didn't have anything like that during the second dose. I had a bit of a sore arm, but I was kind of jealous of my older patients, because if you're older than 55, you're much less likely to have side effects because your immune system is naturally weaker. So you're not going to mount it. Your body's not going to react as strongly, if you will. And that reaction, remember, is a sign that your body is actually responding to the vaccine, doing the work it needs to do to build those antibodies within you. But the good news is, even for older people, we're showing that they've actually been able to develop a 95% level of effectiveness against the vaccine. So the nice news is, overall, we've been giving out millions and millions of doses all around the world. We haven't seen any major safety concerns. The side effect profile gets better as you get older. Number one, that's good news. And it's going to actually lower your risk of getting sick and ending up in hospital and dying by 95%. So that's my little short spiel. So basically, if someone gives you a call and says, we can vaccinate you today, honestly, the sooner the most of us are vaccinated, the better we're protected and we can get back to life as normal.
And don't we all wish for that? Jenny Vea, thank you very much. It is really important, because I certainly personally, and I personally have friends that, conspiracy theorists, anti-maskers, all that stuff. I sort of ignore all that. But quite literally, the conversation about a vaccine, why did it come out so fast? I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth. And I don't know if there's people under a certain age that don't know what that expression means, but hey, it's Rainbow Table. I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth. It's here. The efficacy has occurred. The 95% success rate, if that's my word. I don't know what the 95% success rate, I don't know what it's called. There's always going to be those people that are trying to look for that. And I get it. Anything that's sort of governmental run, people might get a little X-Files about it, but it is so, my takeaway, it's so important that you shared with us about the vaccine, because that's a lot of people's concerns regardless of age. So thank you very much for that and for everything you just shared. Should we bring your colleague and friend on, Dr. Gutman? I think we should bring her back. Hi, friend.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Great to see you, Gloria.
Well, I've been watching you on TV, on the national, keeping us up to date on this rollout.
Absolutely.
And how do the two of you know each other, Dr. Sinha? There's a bit of a delay on your internet, so if there's a second while you answer, how did you?
So I'm actually the president of. I'm actually the president of Dr. Gutman's fan club because she's one of our pioneers in the study of gerontology or the study of aging in Canada. So she knows that I've been one of her big fans for many years, and it's terrific that she doesn't cease to amaze me by doing massive studies even during a pandemic to help us all understand aging and aging well a little bit better. So that's how I know Gloria. I hope to one day be considered as much of an expert in gerontology as she is.
Wow, that was really nice.
Oh, that was very nice.
There was some virtual hugging happening there. And speaking of your hard work, Dr. Gutman, your Robert Beranger has written and put something in the link here for all the people watching to go and take a look at the research that you just recently did during the pandemic. And we'll of course put a link to you, Dr. Sinha, and the hard work that you do all over. Like, I have 3 pages of bios for both of you, and I just couldn't get through any of it. I want to thank you before we wrap up with my skill testing ever important question. Is there anything that you want to tie it up with a bow with? Anything, either of you?
Well, I'd just like to draw attention to the other work that we've done over the years. So we have a team called the Diversity Access Team, and our research has been with looking at how to make advanced care planning easier and more relevant for people from marginalized groups or from ethnic minorities. So if people want more information about that or about our report, if they go to www.sfu.ca/LGBTEOL, that's our website. And we've got all kinds of information that we think is valuable to the LGBT community.
That's amazing. That's great. Dr. Sinha, a final word before my question?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say again, there's a lot of important work that we're doing through our National Institute on Aging at Ryerson. And one of the projects we're doing right now, I just want to give a plug, is we're trying to understand the experiences of older LGBTQ plus individuals living with dementia or their care partners as well. So this is actually a study being funded as part of our National Dementia Strategy and through the Public Health Agency of Canada. And right now we've only been able to recruit 13 people across the country with EGAL's help. So this is a project we're doing in partnership with EGAL. So if you do know, if you are an individual living with dementia, or if you are a care partner to someone living with dementia, we would, and especially, and from the community, this is what we're looking to learn about, because frankly, we can't build better policy unless we get engaged and tell our stories. And so I just hope that we can send some information to the table so that folks can learn about this important initiative that EGAL, the Public Health Agency of Canada, and the NIA are doing in collaboration. Because again, just as an example, all of this work that we do ensures that voices are heard and that we can respond better to the needs of an aging population and the diversity that's reflected in it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you, Jonathan, for putting in the egale.ca/dementia-study. I don't know what's happening with my microphone. I can hear myself a few times. Okay, that concludes our interview, but I do have a very, 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 very serious question to ask the two of you. Okay? It's COVID-19. We've been locked up. The last thing I did was a drag breakfast last March with my 9-year-old. So that's a lasting memory. What are both of you binge watching right now?
Okay.
It's a very intense question. I know. It's a bit of a curveball.
Oh, absolutely. Well, at the beginning of the COVID, I watched all the House series.
Good one.
At the point I could diagnose some of the conditions. No, I'm not a medical doctor. Then I went to Filthy Rich, and what I'm watching now has been Succession, which for a gerontologist is really kind of a choice.
Right.
But if you haven't seen it, it's really quite gripping.
I haven't even heard of it. I'm writing it down. I'm writing it down.
Well, it's about an older man who's built a big business, and he's got 4 kids, and he's trying to, they all would like to fill his shoes, but he's not so sure who it should be.
All right. And Dr. Sinha, what are you binge watching right now?
So at the beginning of the pandemic, my partner actually thought it would be really good to give me something relaxing to watch. So we started binging RuPaul's Drag Race. The problem with that was but then he actually found me a few hours later, actually yelling at the screen, saying, "How did you not know that there would be a sewing challenge?" For example. So we, after we actually realized that actually brought out, kind of a very edgy side to me, because I can be a bit judgy in situations. So now we've moved on to a whole rack of other things now. And actually last night I stayed up late because I was watching a new series that just got dropped on Amazon Prime called It's a Sin, which is a really, really cool kind of view of what it was like to live in the UK during the start of the AIDS epidemic and the HIV epidemic. So a really interesting and thoughtful window. I lived in England for 4 years, so it was kind of interesting to get a little bit of that perspective of what life might have been like for the community at that time.
And it's the lead singer for years and years, who I believe 3 or 4 years ago was graced the main stage at Yonge and Dundas for Pride Toronto. So
amazing.
Yeah, really is so cute, such a cutie. Well, I want to thank you, and I want to thank the viewers for watching. Thank you very much, Dr. Gutman. Thank you very much, Dr. Sinha. I suspect I will be calling on you again for another Rainbow Table episode, and we are recording this, so if you say yes, we may hold you to it.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you again. That's great. COVID-19 facts and fears. Thank you very much for watching Rainbow Table. We are so glad to have you with us. If you haven't joined our Facebook group, please do so today. If you want to take a look at other topics that we've covered in previous Rainbow Tables, you can go to egale.ca and the Rainbow Table. All the videos, Jonathan has put them up there with topics, and you can view them at your leisure. This will also be available again if you want to share it with your friends. I'm just saying. Like we always say at the end of every Rainbow Table, there's always a seat for you at our Rainbow Table. Take good care.